All right, welcome, Brian Swaw. Thanks for doing this. I'm super pumped about this. This is the first college wrestling show for Illinois Wrestler. I'm joined tonight by Brian Swaw, the voice of Illini Wrestling. As you can see, if you've listened to the Big Ten broadcast of any of the Illini duels this year, you've heard his voice. And his son is on the team, so he's been around for a while. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Dalton, this is awesome, man. Thanks for having me. And what a great way to get started, right? On the Big Ten, the season that we had with Illinois this past weekend, and what a great honor to be here with you and making this happen. I'm excited, and especially the first time. Couldn't have been better timing.
Yeah, right. Like, all summer or all season, I've been super busy with high school wrestling and trying to get everything covered. But I've always had the desire to get talking about the college scene because I love college wrestling more than I love anything other than, anything else. I love college wrestling. It's the highest level of wrestling. These guys are phenomenal athletes. They're training as hard as anybody can train. And so this is a great opportunity. And yeah, so you followed the Big Ten this weekend. What was your, initial reaction to just the Big Ten tournament in general, with obviously on Friday, all the upsets going on and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, the takeaway that is going to be controversial, and we're going to start right off the bat. As a team, it's harder to win the Big Ten tournament than it is the NCAA tournament. And people are going to be like, wow, that's your perspective? Well, here, Penn State has won 11 national titles, and they just won their 8th Big Ten tournament, right? So as a team, it's much harder to win that Big Ten tournament than it is the NCAA tournament. I'm not saying from an individual perspective, strictly from a team perspective. And with that being said, what a weekend the Fighting Illini had, kind of left for dead as far as would they finish in the top 5, right? Would they finish in the top 6? Could they surpass Rutgers? Could they surpass Michigan? And what a showing they had, to finish 5th in the Big Ten, just 3 points behind Minnesota. And I know, Dalton, ifs and buts, right? Ifs and buts, and we'll get to them. But one match that stands out to me, if Danny Bronigo wins that match, they finish 3 points ahead of Minnesota, and they're in 4th place behind the Big 4 of the Big Ten. So with that being said, you said it, all the upsets, probably the craziest Big Ten tournament as far as chaos is concerned, right? And no bigger chaos, and we'll get to it, the 157-pound bracket. All the top seeds except, Tyler Kasich are getting upset. So it's just a tough tournament, all said. And I would think, not just me, but all the Big Ten coaches would say, yes, it's harder to win the Big Ten tournament as a team than it is the NCAA tournament. Team perspective now. Don't take it out of context, please.
Yeah. Well, anytime you have to lace it up with a Big Ten opponent, 3-4 matches in a row, it's going to be a difficult task. And I think it is the toughest tournament. There's no easy match in the tournament. Every single one is a dogfight, and it proved to be. And going into the Illini, man, that semifinal match, 174, so much chaos. I felt bad watching Mike in the corner because I felt like the Nebraska coaching staff really, really got on the officials to kind of go back on the earlier call. Like, I really felt bad because it was like Mike was so far away from the officials, and the Nebraska coaches were right on top of him. And I don't think it was 2, but we don't get to go back in time and change it. But again, Bronegel's wrestle back to 3rd place is even more impressive to me, that he not only took that loss, but he responded well, and he beat Karchlaw right in the backside. Illinois was looking good, and I'm super happy for him because, the joke that I've been saying is like they're wrestling for that new facility. They're really trying to put out a performance to make the administrative support or whatever's being held back as far as what can take Illini wrestling to the next level. So I was very happy to see that they came to show up. But so give me a little bit more breakdown from the Illini team.
Yeah, I mean, why you touched on that and you brought up Mike, there's a couple things, right? And you're exactly right at that 174-pound match. If you follow me on Twitter, that my joke was, how many Nebraska coaches does it take to challenge the last second takedown?
Yeah.
Every time he came over, there was another one in the corner. And, then Mark Manning comes running over there. And, but that didn't go the way that we thought it should. But to your point is, I was very critical, on a broadcast earlier in the season, early January. Illinois comes out after taking a whole month off, right? And they wrestled on the eve of the Big Ten football championship against Indiana. And then they didn't wrestle again for over a month until they took on Ohio State right after the first year. And I believe it was like January 6th. And on that broadcast, I was very critical because I just thought that layoff was too big. I thought, hey, just like you're a competitor. How do you get better? You wrestle, you compete. And I'm watching all these other Big Ten teams wrestle during that time. They're wrestling at the Midlands. They're doing other stuff. And Illinois came out flat against Ohio State. They lost some matches, and you brought up one that they ended up winning later in the season. And not only was I critical of Mike, I was critical of the rest of the coaching staff. And the whole thought process is they have an older team. They have a veteran-laden team. They have some 6-year guys. They have guys that took medical red shirts last year. They have guys that took Olympic red shirts. And Mike's thought process and his vision was to keep these guys healthy all year long. And it wasn't to beat them up on the grind. And give credit where credit is due. And especially people in the media, Dalton, we're quick to say, I told you so, right? But we're not quick to admit when we're wrong. And I was wrong about this. And kudos to Mike Flood and his staff for getting this team not only well rested, but getting them ready for that Big Ten tournament. And I thought, based on their performances, and we'll get into it by weights, I thought they looked healthy. I thought they looked fresh. I thought they looked like the better conditioned opponent, even though they wrestled less than everyone else in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, well, I think everything is easier to talk about in hindsight, right? And it could have went the wrong way, right? You never really know how injuries go. I do think that competing in wrestling is the hardest thing to do to preserve your body, because whenever somebody has a leg, you're fighting until your leg falls off. You don't want to give up the takedown. And those types of positions ultimately lead to the issues that tend to come up later in the season. You see guys taped up. Illinois has been known to have a lot of knees taped towards the end of the year, and I think this year, these guys looked ready to go and ready to compete all 7 minutes, and that's what they did. So, I'm looking forward to seeing if they can carry it into the nationals next week. And but maybe we can jump into the Big Ten results, and not just the Illini, just Illinois kids in general. Just off the top of mind, Matt Ramos gets third at the Big Ten tournament. How did he look?
Matt Ramos obviously was coming into it with a ton of confidence, but also a ton of pressure, right? You're coming in the tournament undefeated, still holding all that pressure from beating Spencer Lee 2 years ago. Didn't have the greatest tournament last year, did in place as far as the NCAA goes. And here he comes in and he gets that freshman from Penn State, right? Luke Littledale, who's fantastic. And I haven't seen too many people, with the exception of Brandon McCrone, catching him in that cradle, really dominate Littledale for the 7 minutes. And it'll be an interesting matchup come, the NCAA tournament. But I still believe Matt Ramos is a hands-on favorite. And I think that this loss through a 6-year senior who has all the experience in the world, I think he's going to use this to propel him in Philadelphia. That's my early prediction. I know we'll get to it in a little bit. But I'm not worried about Matt Ramos's final result. I think he's done it all year. Tony Ursuline has that team, far as from individuals, going in the right direction, and they'll be fired up. And Matt, there's no bigger performer in prime time than Matt Ramos, right? Yeah. And it's not just what he did with Spencer Lee, but those who know him, he's a showman. He enjoys the crowd, and he's going to play to it. So I think we'll get some redemption in a couple of weeks, Dalton.
Yeah, Matt Ramos is consistently shown up all throughout high school and consistently throughout college. So I agree. I think I'm looking forward to that, because obviously he's not going to lay down for anybody, and those matches are just going to get closer. 133. This is the big Illini win. Lucas Bird. How did that tournament look for him?
Bird is the word, right?
Yeah.
And Lucas is coming in extremely confident. And, let's just take a step back. His only loss was to Drake Ayala. And in that dual meet, they go into Iowa, a very tough place to wrestle. And Lucas comes out very, very defensive and lets Ayala dictate the match, hits him with that nice little slide by that he's so good at. And then it just didn't go his way. And Lucas has been wrestling so aggressive all season. And I talked to Lucas at the end of the year and basically like, hey, if you're on your attacks and you're aggressive, you're extremely hard to beat because there's a couple things about Lucas. One, he doesn't get ridden very often. And two, he's really, really good on top. And I think the takeaway for me is, if we're just going to talk about the finals, is to hear the Iowa faithful say, hey, we really want that match back because he got caught. No, he didn't get caught. He got stuck. And I didn't hear him say that when Tony Ramos was hitting that crusher on everyone in Iowa, right? But that's how deep it was. And it was so great to see Lucas with the confidence. And he has all the ability in the world. The thing with Lucas is he has to stay aggressive. And if he does, those are the results you get. And he had just a great dominant tournament. And no one threatened him the whole weekend. And I don't want to spoil it, but I do love his draw in a few weeks.
Yeah. He looked impressive, and again, like you said, confidence is everything. And he didn't look timid when he was wrestling Drake the first time or this one. I think you always have to be, cautious because Drake is really good at that slide by drag, and if you get too aggressive with him, he's going to slide by and he's going to score, and you're going to get so frustrated. So I thought he wrestled really well, and he caught him being a little lazy, and he got him. So yeah, that was good.
And real quick too, if you go back and you watch the video of him getting that deep crusher in, and then you see Mike Poeta come out of his seat and he's kind of in the corner like this, and you can hear Mike say, keep going. And then you see it. And Lucas was not letting that go, Dalton. He was not letting it go.
Yeah. And just for it's a hard one to let go if you know how to do it. But, jumping up 149, Cannon Webster. Now he's a freshman now, right? Like, so last year he redshirted. He's a freshman. Now, does he get called a redshirt freshman now, right?
Yeah, it gets called a redshirt freshman, and he's still classified, for all the freshman awards. He's still a freshman. Freshman and redshirt freshman, for all intents and purposes, get classified together.
Yeah, and he showed up. I mean, obviously last year he was wrestling extremely well throughout the entire year. I was kind of like confused why they didn't just keep wrestling him, knowing that with injuries and stuff, you never know if that was the year that he could have All-American and all of a sudden something happens and it goes. But, he looks good this year. He has a huge win in the semifinals against Van Ness. He loses to Ridge Lovett, who is obviously a seasoned veteran. But yeah, what are your takes on Webster's Big Ten tournament?
Excuse me. Yeah. We're going to take a step back. Cannon Webster had a rough stretch, right? He had 3 consecutive losses, and I was really worried about Cannon for a short period of time because he was having difficulty getting off the bottom. He got rode out by Emilio. He didn't take down against Parco, and then Cartella takes top and turns him, right? And never in a stretch of Illinois wrestling have any of us, including yourself, seen Cannon Webster lose 3 straight matches. But Cannon, his wrestling IQ and acumen is so high, Dalton. Like, I just look at his run of the NCAA tournament. When I looked at this bracket to start, I'm like, okay, not the greatest draw for Cannon. He's going to go against 2 guys that he has beaten him previously and beaten him in the last basically 45 days. But I don't know that I've ever seen anyone either beat Cannon as bad the second time or Cannon doesn't have his number. Cannon is just, and I don't think it's fair. And I'm gonna take another stance. I've always said that Cannon is a defensive wrestler. And I started thinking about it in my head, and that kind of seems negative, right? When you say defensive wrestler. No, he's a counter wrestler. He takes advantage of everyone's other mistakes because he's that good and he's that smart. And the one thing that he's also big. He's a very big 149-pounder. He walks around probably just a click under 6 foot or maybe 6 foot tall. And to see, I knew that the Emilio match was going to go in Cannon's favor. Cannon is just too good, and he's such a gamesman. And, but the Van Ness match had me worried until the second period. And I'm like saying to myself, listen, man, you keep letting this kid stick around, he's going to make you pay for it. And as the clock kept ticking, and I think you would agree with me, the confidence kept growing. And there was a couple of times where he almost had Van Ness, right? And Van Ness really became passive. And if you watch that first match, Van Ness went to that underhook, far ankle pick 2 or 3 times, took Cannon down 4 times in that match, and didn't even really threaten Webster in this one. So really liked the tournament Cannon had. I felt like in the final match against Lovett, and it was a 1-0 match, right? I felt like that Cannon, not that he was happy to be there, but Lovett just didn't. It was a very boring match to watch. And I'm excited to see that match in 2 weeks because I think we'll get into the quarterfinals. And I'm not saying there'll be a different result, but I think it'll be a much different score.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Big Ten tournament, sometimes they're wrestling for seeds into the nationals. So some people are a little bit more conservative. At nationals, they're going to be a little bit more encouraged to get that takedown. We have to go. Let's go all the way up to 65. We got a couple Illinois kids. Obviously, Mikey Caliendo of Iowa loses to Messenbrink. It was a closer match this time. He didn't get tech-falled in like he did in Carver. And Braden Scholes takes 5th at 65. So yeah, from Caliendo, he looked like he was narrowing the gap, or what did you see on that?
It's hard for me to. There's no bigger fan of Mikey Caliendo than Illinois guys, right?
Yeah.
Except for he's wearing black and yellow and not orange, right? And that's the hard part of this, But Mikey is such a competitor and such a battler, and not many people, wrestle Mitchell Messenbrink to that kind of match. And Mikey's a competitor and a battler, but Messenbrink knows he's got that little boot scoot, right? And he doesn't engage him, and he doesn't get in those tie-ups with Mikey. And unfortunately for Mikey, Mitchell Messenbrink's at 157 and 165, and he's the best wrestler in the country. Right. And he might be pound for pound the best wrestler in the country. That's yet to be determined. And so it's one of those things like, and I don't mean to give you a basketball analogy, but it was like Michael Jordan, right? Everyone knew they were playing for second. I kind of feel that way with Mitchell Messenbrink and Mikey Caliendo, because Mikey's good enough to be a national champ in any other weight class.
Yeah.
Braden Scholes, my favorite Illinois wrestler besides one other one, right? And I don't think I need to name that one.
Favorite, right? All right.
Right. But Braden Scholes, he is the silent assassin, and he's just a very, very laid-back kid. He's very quiet, and then he steps on the mat, and he's the meanest, nastiest kid, that he's out there. He gets on top of you. He's vicious. He's tight, real tight waist. He's kicking legs out, and people just hate wrestling Braden Scholes. I knew from the draw that Braden was was in a really, really good spot. I thought from the get-go that he would wrestle Minto very tough. Everyone says that was a controversial finish. There was some stalling calls. There was some back and forth, and you're probably right. However, we're going to take that win. And then, Braden just, Mikey Caliendo has Braden's number, and rightfully so. I mean, that's the difference. But the one thing that I just think is that I was really a little bit disappointed on that backside because – and I haven't seen Andrew Sparks wrestle this year, but I did see him wrestle last year, and I just thought that Braden Scholes, that match should be closer. And then he gets a default in for 5th and 6th place against Max Mayfield, who's been hurt back and forth a couple years. But I really like Braden Scholes' tenacity. But there's one thing I was going to say, right? And I'm not the coach, but if I was, I'd tell Braden Scholes this. You don't have to give up the first takedown in order to win matches in college. And he tends to give up the first takedown in all the matches. So as a broadcaster, I'm thinking, okay, par for the course. We're going to win this one, right? But, come the NCAA tournament, you got to get stingier. You know that. You have to give up less points. But Braden Scholes is a competitor. He's a great athlete, and he's got a big future ahead of him, for the Illini.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you said that well. I mean, the national tournament is a different beast. So if you can figure it out in the next week and a half, you can make adjustments and win some important matches, and maybe he'll get on the podium and help the Illini get some team points going into the national team race. But this is perfect timing. So we are joined. We're joined by a guest, a former Illini. So this is actually perfect. And he wrestled 174 pounds and was a 3-time All-American for the University of Illinois. So let me bring him up. Jordan Blanton, what's up,
guys?
Yeah, perfect timing. Perfect timing.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, perfect timing. We just were going through the Big Ten tournament results, and we're actually at one of your weight classes, 174 pounds. And yeah, I mean, I want to get your perspective just as a former Illini and a fan of the sport. Like, what did you think just about the Illini performance at the Big Ten tournament?
I've said it a couple times, and I think it's been pretty much echoed in every circle. But that was one of the most exciting events to be an Illini fan in quite some time. You know, just from top to bottom, weight class after weight class, everybody performed like up to their level. Some guys, you know, you could say overperformed or outplaced their seeds and whatnot, but it was great, you know, match after match. That Saturday night round, the semifinals, even the matches that didn't go our way were exciting and fun and had you on the edge of your seat, and we were competing with the best guys in the country. It was awesome to watch.
Yeah. Well, going into the 74-pound weight class, you know, Dan Braunagel gets third, but he had a controversial loss in the semis. What was your thought on how he wrestled and maybe a little bit on the controversy?
So that was tough to watch, you know, because he had the match in the bag, and it was a situation where he felt like he did enough to win and was wrestling well. And it was like a 1 in a million, just the way Pinto got that angle and was able to convert with such short time left and no stalling calls and stuff like that was crazy. What was most impressive to me, though, was how he bounced back and just continued to keep wrestling at that same level. And it's like, having gone through it and having been there, it's much better to take that loss in the semis and then, you know, make up for it at the national tournament than win that match in the semis and then maybe have, you know, a less than stellar performance at the NCAAs or whatever. So in some ways, I feel like that could be a blessing in disguise. Something that he took on the chin, continued rolling on Sunday, and then, you know, hopefully continues rolling this weekend. And looking in the bracket, and kind of where his seat is, I think there's a lot of opportunity for him to kind of keep the momentum rolling, and I'm excited for him.
Yeah, I would agree. Brian, what did you think? Anything that stood out for you?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm screaming at the TV, "Run, Forrest, run!" You know, just run. He hadn't been called for stalling yet, right? And you know, just get out of there. And you know, when I looked at the bracket to start off, I thought to myself, hey, Danny's in a good spot here. And if you would have seen the end of that Harchla match in the duel, and it was an 11-5 match, but Danny was starting to pressure him and was in on a lot of attacks that he couldn't finish. And I just thought that, you know, Danny if I look at the bracket and I'm looking at those second round matches, I'm thinking, hey, this is the best spot for Danny Braunagel. And to come back and win that match, it gave him a lot of confidence. And you know, he goes into that Pinto match and he hasn't won, but you know, I think to Jordan's point, to come back and bounce back, and he fell back in a great spot, you know, in that wrestle background. And then he gets Harchla again, which was super important for me and super important to see that he wins it 2 times. The first time wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a fluke that he beat him, and he beats him twice and gives him great confidence moving into that. But, you touched on it earlier, Dalton, about, hey, you know, there was 17 Nebraska coaches in the corner challenging it. There was Mike and Jeremy Hunter there. Where were the big boys, Jordan? Where was Aymar? Where were the guys helping us out here, man? We needed some big boys there.
Their corner was too far away. They didn't get the same
it
type
was tough,
of.
Yeah. And I do think that the coaches kind of put their finger on the scale in that moment. My wife tells me that I'm like the most annoying coach to watch when I'm coaching and sitting in the corner because of passion and everything like that. And then I think Mark Manning took over the top spot as getting under her skin when we were watching that. She was fired up. She's like, he needs to sit down, and Coach Manning's great, but when you're competing against them, you're like, yeah, sit down,
Yeah. And, I've talked a few times about this, like, at the high school level, it's a little easier to really get frustrated with certain calls because the officials just aren't as good. At the Division I level, a lot of them are really high level. They're trying their best. They're really putting effort towards getting the right call. And I think that we would be better served if we took the college coaches a little bit further away from being able to really get into the official's ear like that. Cause it didn't even seem like they had enough time to really like evaluate it. They kind of made the second call really quick. The first one they took 35 minutes doing, but the second one was a little bit harder, but not spending too much time on that. Going into the next bracket, 184, Edmund Ruth gets third place as well. I mean, Jordan, these guys are looking good at these upper weights. Like, what did you see out of Edmund, and what do you think that is going to, what is this a sign as far as how they can compete at the NCAA tournament? Well,
that's kind of the funny thing about Edmund is he's been like, I guess you could call him Steady Eddie. He's never going to do too much, but he's had so much success. He was round of 12 2 years ago. He's a Big Ten champion and All-American last year, and really kind of knocking on the doorstep to make the NCAA finals last year. Fell to Rocco Welch, and he's been at that level, so I guess it's not a surprise. However, this year at the new weight class, at 184, guys tend to carry a little bit more horsepower, and it seems like his style wasn't necessarily as effective up at 184 compared to 174. But then you watch him this weekend, and he wrestled awesome. He really went out there. Even in his loss, he was super competitive, I felt like, and competed hard against a great opponent. And then again, I feel like special things at these big tournaments are done on the backside. You need your guys to step up, your Lucas Bird, your Cannon Webster, and things like that. But when you have warriors and proven guys like the Braunagel brothers, and in this case, like Edmund Ruth, what you got there is that wasn't a fluke either. That wasn't something crazy. That's really what he's been consistently doing his whole career. And I think, at the right time, people peak, people figure stuff out. And I think he's really figuring it out and wrestling at his best at the end of the year, which is what you're looking for.
Yeah. And Brian, just going into continuing with this concept and going into 97 with Zach Braunagel getting third as well. Like, what are your thoughts on how they're competing on the backside, and how important? Again, not to suggest that everybody's going to lose at the NCAA tournament, but it's not easy to get to the NCAA finals. And if you don't get to the NCAA finals, you have got to get the next best thing. And the fact that these guys 3 in a row get the next best thing, that's a big deal when it comes to team points and becoming an All-American.
Yeah, and if I could step back with Edmund real quick, he avenged 2 losses on the backside. Gabe Arnold and Jackson Smith, and I thought he looked better than both of them, and it wasn't a fluke that it happened. And so that's a credit not only to Edmund, but that's a credit to the coaching staff preparing these guys to succeed after failure, right? To your point and to Jordan's point. And so I've been critical of Edmund all year because we see these flashes of greatness and flashes of explosiveness, and it leaves us wanting for more, right? And then we don't get it. And then all of a sudden, Edmund shows up at the Big Ten tournament. It's like, okay, Edmund, that's the Edmund we want. So, not to go back, and I apologize, but I do owe Edmund an apology because I've been harsh on him on the broadcast all year. But it's just because we want so much more from him. But talk about more. Zach Braunagel, he really stepped up this weekend, and I really thought that it was really critical for him not only to dominate and beat Isaiah Salazar on the front side, but to come back and wrestle Buchanan to the match that he did. And to Jordan's point, it's being competitive in these matches where no one thought Zach was going to beat Buchanan, right? I mean, let's just be honest. But to wrestle him to a 4-0 match and make it super competitive, I think he walked off that mat, on Friday night and said, hey, third place is mine. And he went back out, and I was glad to see Salazar make that third place match, because it was super important, just like his brother, not only to beat Hartschel on the front side, beat him on the back side, beat Salazar on the front side, who was a higher seed, and everyone said, hey, he's going to beat Zach. And then he beats him for the second time. So just a great momentum builder. And I think that just basically goes to show the veteran leadership of this team, the veterans that they have on the team, and kudos to the mental makeup of what Mike's been preaching all year long about keep pushing through. We're going to do this. We're going to do it, and succeeding after failure. And that's what you've seen all weekend with these guys. And it was very prevalent in the last 3 weeks, 74, 84, and 97. That was the mantra, exactly what you guys said.
Yeah, and winning those close matches, I just think that it's so critical to win an overtime match in those matches. I mean, everybody who has wrestled at a high level understands that these guys are always a takedown match away. Like it's you're gonna fight for a takedown, and the fact that they're coming away with it is impressive. Jumping into the heavyweight, you got Luke Luffman. This is probably one of the toughest weight classes to All-American at, I would think, outside of maybe 41 and a few others. But Jordan, what do you think he's going to have to do to get on the medal stand next week?
Well, one thing I wanted to say is you hit 3 weight classes in a row right there, 74, 84, 97, where those guys performed great. And Luke's situation, he had a good tournament, but you could almost kind of in the same breath say he underperformed. He's got a win over Keeter. Keeter, I believe, was third in the bracket. He's beaten some of those guys before, and he was competitive in his matches. But I think with him, it's really about getting out and getting to a guy early. He does a great job when he's pushing forward and when he's looking to attack. At the national tournament, and especially in this heavyweight class, that forward pressure and getting on guys and getting a lead and then not just being satisfied with the lead, but continuing to chip away is going to give you your best opportunity. So in my experience, the Big Ten was more or less, I looked at it, obviously it's a qualifier, but it was a trial run for the NCAAs. It's 2 days as opposed to 3, but pretty much after maybe the first round, you're wrestling national qualifiers and getting a preview of the NCAA tournament every round after that. So he got a bunch of good looks. He wrestled well. And I think that if he just continues to build upon that, he's already proven that he can do it for years now. For years, he's been on the knocking on the door. Now he really, I think, needs to get to his offense early, get into those snatch singles, pulling on those guys. And even whether he's scoring or not, he's going to be in a better position to go out and get it at the end of the match, doing the hard work early. So that's what I see there. And without a doubt, I think he's got great potential to be on the podium.
Yeah. Brian, what are your thoughts on the heavyweight?
I don't know that there's any tougher weight class, from the Big Ten perspective that transfers over to the NCAA tournament. I mean, Luke Luffman finishes 6th at the Big Ten tournament and gets the 8th seed in the NCAA tournament, right? And we're going to cover it, but Danny Brownigal finishes 3rd and gets the 20th seed. It's just so competitive. The thing with the heavyweight class of the Big Ten tournament, Luke Luffman, out of all the Illini wrestlers that placed, by far had the toughest draw. Right. And you mentioned it with those guys, and he just can't get past Nick Feldman for some reason. And then, he wrestles Feldman, then he wrestles Nevels, then he falls to, the Heimsland from Michigan, and then he gets Feldman again. And it's like, there's no easy out in that tournament for sure at the heavyweight level. And, I just think that Luke, from, touching on what Jordan said, is, you get a Feldman again, you have to attack. You just have to attack, and you haven't beat him yet, and you just have to go after him, because when Luke is aggressive, he's got a great little snatch single. He's hard to ride, and he could be explosive when he needs to be. But it just seemed like this past weekend is that he was a little bit reluctant on his attacks on his feet. He wasn't as aggressive as he usually is. And then we're going to have to see it this weekend, in 2 weeks, I guess, in Philadelphia, because he has another tough draw again, unfortunately.
Yeah. And, just thinking about heavyweight, I'm curious about this. And Jordan, you wrestled at a heavier weight, so you might have a better perspective. But I think I see it, and I've always noticed it. But when you get into those battles, right, you're hand fighting so hard. At the heavier weights, these kids are bigger and stronger, right? If you wrestle 6 minutes or 7 minutes with Gable Steveson, like it's a different – it's taking something out of you. Like, how hard is it for some of these heavyweights to kind of like respond after a match like that?
So in Luffman's situation, he's personality wise, he's really kind of like easygoing, mild mannered guy. He doesn't seem super intense, but as a competitor, he's as tough as they come. He's had a long career. He's had a crazy amount of success. And to exactly your point, as this tournament wears on, you see guys, they're physically, they drop levels, day after day. You're sore, you're tired, you're banged up, you're bloodied up, you look like you've been through a freaking car accident. Is, crazy as that sounds, that's what I think is going to be Luffman's biggest strength going into this. He is so tough. He can battle so hard. I think he's got to use that. It's almost like you go in there a little bit with reckless abandon, and he's got to lean into that. I think if he continues to push forward, if he's wrestling on day 3 with his, forehead wrapped or black eye or busted up, that's going to mean that he's going out and scrapping every single match. And when he does that, things fall in his favor. So, to answer your question, 100%. I think the physicality in a tournament like this at this level is tough, especially at heavyweight. Heavyweight's my favorite weight class. Maybe the wrestling is, in some of the wrestling positions are a little bit less of an art form at that weight class. But those guys are big, strong athletes, and the horsepower and what they have behind their attacks and stuff is pretty special. So, in that regard, I think if he comes ready to fight and ready for a war and just keeps his foot on the gas and keeps moving forward, of everybody in that weight class, and there's a lot of phenomenal wrestlers. I really feel like that's going to be his key to success in that weekend. So I'm sorry to Mrs. Luffman, but I'm hoping that we see a bruised up, bloodied up Luke Luffman on Saturday getting on that.
Not just tape him up anyway, right?
That's right. That's right.
Tough,
yeah,
but,
exactly.
To Jordan's point, real quick, and then we can get to the brackets of the NCAA tournament. Heavyweight is not like it was 10 or 15 years ago. These guys are monsters. They're not the overweight guy that looks sloppy in a singlet. They're physical specimens. And it is just amazing to watch the athletic ability of these big guys. And, I would think, about when this is all said and done in 2 weeks, you go look at the average weight and the average athletic built of those guys that place, and you're going to be like, yeah, they could all play on an NFL football team. They're not the sloppy heavyweights of 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, this has been a hot topic, but how impressive is Gable Steveson? Literally for him to make really big, strong dudes look so weak and feeble, right? Like he lifted up Feldman and tossed him, and it didn't even look like he tried that hard. And I'm sitting here at 140 pounds, like, man, I really hope I never have to encounter this guy on his bad days, because it's incredible. So, what do you think about that, Jordan?
Well, what for a long time, what impressed me the most about Gable was his ability to snap and then move laterally, hit an angle, and run through guys. What really impressed me, especially like in the finals against Kirkfleet. He was able to just take a back step and shoot in and suck in a double or a single leg and use his horsepower to drive up through guys, which is a skill that I don't think he has to necessarily rely on very often, but just showing what he's capable of. There's nothing he can't do on a wrestling mat. And I've been fortunate to see a lot of good wrestlers in my lifetime and whatnot. And I think he's up there, and definitely in the top 5, but you're probably looking at top 2 or 3 most exciting, most dominant collegiate wrestlers we've ever seen. So it's great to see him back. There's some good storylines that, obviously with Penn State having the returning national champion at the weight class, and we saw what that match was like. I didn't see anything that says that in 2 weeks it's going to be any different, but to see him on one final run, I have this sneaking suspicion in my mind in the Big Ten finals, it looked like Gable was content to win by whatever it was, 5 or 6 or 7 points, and didn't necessarily have to put his foot on the gas. But I could see him trying to open it up for this last tournament, and I think there might be a pretty spectacular display on Saturday night at the NCAAs.
Yeah, touching on that, Dalton, you had mentioned how he picked Feldman up and throw. I was waiting for the old Hulkamania there, right? And that would be great if he came out and ripped his shirt off. And,
that would have been the greatest scene I've ever. Yeah, that would have been awesome.
He is the most dominant wrestler in NCAAs right now, and it's not even close.
Yeah, maybe history.
Yeah, and 2, he's an extraordinary figure, and he should build off of it. It's great for the sport, and I know he went and wrestled at WWE, and I know he tried out for the Buffalo Bills, but you know what? We need that type of stuff to continue to promote the sport, and I'd love for him to come out with the ripped shirt and just start tearing it off and all that, and I think Jordan's right. None of his matches are going to be close, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's even more dominant, and it would be a shame if he's not the outstanding wrestler of the NCAA tournament if that happens.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. And the only thought that I ever had was if Messenbrink continued to tech fall the number 2 kid, but Caliendo closed the gap. So, I mean, I used to always get confused why people would shoot on Gable because he was so good at reattacks and snapping. And then when I watched Kirkfleet didn't shoot. And then Gable shot, and Gable made it, and he still made it look easy. So, yeah, he's special, and I look forward to. Yeah, I think Jordan, you're right. I think he's going to press the gas down and make a statement that I think we all can be proud of, because whatever's next for him is going to be a great representation of what wrestling can do at a high level. So,
hey, Dalton, can I just, before we move on to the NCAA tournament, there's one last thing I want to touch on about the Big Tens, right? And Penn State wins it for the 8th time. Cale Sanderson's the coach of the year. Okay, why don't you just give it to Cale every year? Just make it the Cale Sanderson Award, right? Like when Nick Saban's winning, every national title in Alabama. But I have to tell you, the coach of the year should have been between Mark Manning and Mike Poeta. That's who it should have been between. Based on the fact that Nebraska finishes 2nd and outpaces Iowa, right? After Iowa has the best college team money can buy, and that's for a different Illinois Wrestler College podcast. And then Illinois, Mike Poeta, 9 wins, comes into the Big Ten tournament, and no one thinks that they're going to have this performance, and he does. But to me, it was already decided to give it to Cale Sanderson. So from an Illinois wrestler perspective, it should have been Manning or Poeta. That's how I want to end that Big Ten tournament on. And if you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear it. But that's the case.
Spot on.
Yeah. I mean, I guess all I would say is, I think I have more confidence in Mike's ability down the road to create opportunities to become a title contender for the Big Ten. And I don't think he needs a participation trophy, if you will. I think he is a competitor, and I think he really wants to win. And I think if he continues down the path, he's going to earn that Coach of the Year by winning a Big Ten title. And yeah, so I mean, I agree with you. I think obviously Illinois came and they performed great, but I think the things that are moving in the right direction for the Illini will continue under Mike's leadership, and I think he'll get his awards in due time. He's still young. We're still young. You know, Jordan and I were on his team. We're still young. Don't make him need to get these awards too early. He's got plenty of time.
Yeah. Well, hey, I hope that's coming. But, if you want to jump into the NCAA brackets and kind of go through a quick breakdown, I mean, I'm excited about it. I'm pumped.
Yeah.
It seems like to me we kind of covered the heavyweight one, right?
Yeah.
We spent time on Luffman and Stevenson, but there's a lot to get down, and there's some really cool breakdowns and really cool matchups.
Yeah, and Jordan, keep me posted on the time. If you got to get out of here, you let me know. But I did want to hear, obviously we can jump into the NCAA brackets and kind of go through them, but I really do you have any other, Illinois wrestlers, Illinois high school wrestlers that you're looking forward to watching at the NCAA tournament this next week?
Yeah, for sure. So, one thing that I always pay a lot of attention to is the NCAA qualifiers by state and different things like that. And I think Illinois, they're in the top 5, and the 2, 3, 4, and 5, I think, are all, spread apart by 1 or 2 qualifiers. So I think my count, and I don't know if you guys already went through this, but it's around 24, 25, 26, somewhere in that range, which is awesome. Going back to what Brian was saying about Puetta being coach of the year, and Dalton, what you said about him having time, it's like, I felt like this weekend was really the coming out party of the Puetta era and the direction of the program. Obviously, there's a lot of young hammers in the room, guys on red shirt, guys that are freshmen in the lineup this year, and the recruiting classes coming in. So the state of Illinois is in a great spot right now, producing a lot of great wrestlers. I love watching them when they compete for U of I, but just a couple guys, and at 125 is a great example. Two guys, Vincent Robinson is somebody that's won at this level, at this national level, for as long as I've been watching him as a youth, in high school, and now in college. Is he the 3 seed?
4 seed.
Yeah, as the 4 seed. And then a guy that I was sitting with Brian when Matt Ramos shocked the world and pinned Spencer Lee a couple of years ago. We were sitting together, and that was Tulsa, right? That was when it was in Tulsa. He's another guy. Those two in this weight class, and I think there's more, but those two specifically, I think, are going to make a lot of noise in this bracket this weekend.
Yeah, just jumping into 125, obviously, in-state universities, Blake West, he's had a phenomenal year. He had a close match with Matt Ramos earlier. He's on the top side, but he feeds into Lilydale. We also got Maximo Renteria at Oregon State, former Illini. I mean, this weight class is very interesting to see how it plays out because Spratley comes into the potential quarterfinals with Ramos. Again, that first round match with Joey Cruz and Vincent Robinson. I think Vincent Robinson has what it takes to win, but he's still young. This is going to be his first NCAA tournament. I mean, even though I think this is Joey Cruz's first national tournament as well. You just know I was going to be prepared to wrestle a close match and try to win it. So, I think that this is a interesting weight class. And isn't Charlie Farmer from Illinois as well? Yep. Yeah, and he's wrestling for Army. Yeah. So, this one's full of Illinois guys.
And Matt Ramos being the 2nd seed kind of plays into his favor here, right? If I'm looking at the top of this bracket with Lilydale, Figueroa, and Robinson, I'm thinking to myself, hey, I'm glad to be on the bottom of this bracket with, Ramos and Ventresca from Virginia Tech. I mean, that's where you want to be. So I see a clear path for Ramos to the finals, and I'm really looking forward to that quarterfinal match between Figueroa and Vincent Robinson.
Yeah. And don't forget, Caleb Smith is also on the top side, and he had a big win earlier in the year. I think he beat – who did he beat? Did he beat Lilydale? who did he beat earlier in the year? I know he had a big win over a top-ranked opponent. I'll have to look and see who it was, but Caleb Smith is a funky wrestler, but yeah, 25 is going to be fun. 33. This is Illini gets the number 1 seed, Lucas Bird. What do you guys think about the 133-pound weight class?
Go ahead, Jordan.
So Bird is the word. There was a part of me. I've stayed pretty steady high on him because I just know the way Mike talks about him, Coach Plata talks about him, how he is as a competitor, and just how he gets himself ready to go. That I felt like he's going to be one of the contenders. But I'm watching Drake Ayala wrestle all year long, and I'm just like, he just seems like he's getting better and better. He's so good in so many positions, so technical on his feet, tough on top. And I'm like, that's going to be a really hard puzzle to solve. And then even watching the first period, I felt like Bird was starting to figure him out. And then it happened so quick in the second period. But for him to go and deck him like that, momentum is a really big thing in this sport. I think he's wrestling unbelievable. So I really like his path to get to the finals. And then on the bottom side, I'm a huge Nasir Bailey fan. I like him in the 3 seed, and I like him and Drake in the semis. And one thing about Bailey is kind of back to that Vincent Robinson at 125. I've only seen Bailey excel at the highest levels. The brighter the lights, the bigger the stage, the better he's competed. So I really like that matchup. I would love to see Bailey versus Bird, which would be, I believe, an All-Star Classic rematch on Saturday night in the NCAA Finals.
Speaking of that, I mean, that would be the most exciting match of that bracket. The match that I'm looking at is Lucas Bird, Brendan Davis. And does Penn State, do those guys, are they ready to step up? Davis looked great last year, won the Big Ten tournament, stubbed his toe in the NCAA tournament, and has been hurt all year. And Bird dominated him in the duel. And I expect that to happen again. Just don't take down on Brendan Davis. He's sneaky wrestler on top. But I'm looking at that bracket, and it's the same thing. Like, hey, Lucas Bird finishes the 1 seed, and he gets Seth Romney on the 4th seed. And Romney lost back-to-back matches about 2 weeks ago, and one of them was to Nasir Bailey. So, a great setup for where Lucas is. I love where he's sitting. Obviously, he's the 1 seed, but I just love how it played out. I see Dominic Serrano or a surprise coming out of that bottom bracket, and I think they will challenge Romney, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's Bird and someone else. But I do think that I'm on the same path with Jordan. Is as long as Nasir Bailey gets there and his weight's fine and he's not cutting a bunch of stuff, to get to that semi-final match, I could really see that falling in Nasir's favor.
Yeah. Yeah, and he had a phenomenal tournament last year, becoming the first All-American for Arkansas and everything. So, yeah, I think the top side, the winner of Davis Bird in the quarters is got to be on a clear path to the finals. But 41, we got Illinois guy Danny Pacino. He's at the 28 spot down at the middle quarter. I mean, this was the crazy weight class at the Big Ten tournament. How do you guys think this one's going to play out? You should go to Vegas if you got a winner. I'll jump in. There's another Illinois kid, Josh Quarterhound, too, that's seated 4th. Very, very physical, very good, Greco wrestler. Where's he from?
He's from down south.
St. Luke's area.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and so he has a 4 seed, but Jesse Mendez has the toughest path, in my opinion, of any returning national champ, maybe ever, right? They did Jesse no favors in this bracket. He's going to possible matchup with Bombar, in the quarters, Lemley at the second match, and then Bo Bartlett again for the 80th time, and can someone score more than 4 points in that match? I'm not sure.
Don't count out Tegan Jamison now.
Yeah. And it's like, I just think, Hardy one. How about Hardy and Aliras in the quarterfinals?
This is
that
crazy.
was going to be my point. It's like Aliras is the NCAA champ at the 8 seed. It's crazy.
Yeah.
One loss.
It's nuts, but I wouldn't bet against Jesse Mendez. I personally, I know he lost twice this weekend, but I would not bet against Jesse Mendez. I personally wouldn't. He's battle tested. He's tough as they come, and I'm picking Jesse Mendez in this bracket.
Jordan, who you got?
Yeah, so I had to do a pick 'em earlier today, and I really like Happel too out of the 5 seed. I believe you took it away, but that's a guy that he's just Northern Iowa. I think wrestles a certain way and competes a certain way, and he's a guy where you take Mendez and Bartlett out of his half. I think that looks really well, but he's going to have Coderhunt, he's going to have Aliras, and he's going to have Hardy on his side. So those could easily be 1 and 2 seeds, and in an alternate universe where Mendez and Bartlett aren't. But I really like the idea of Happel making it on the top side, kind of making some upsets. If it's not him, Aliras would be my favorite, and then at the beginning of the year, I was high on Mendez. In the middle of the year, I was high on Mendez, and he's my pick at this weight class as well.
Yeah, I think you guys have good valuations. I mean, Mendez is hard to pick against. He is so good, and but I'm looking forward to just the matchups. I mean, that Jameson is the one that took out Aliras at the Big 12, right?
Yep.
And like Hardy has been wrestling Real Woods for a couple of years, and now Real Woods is gone, so now he's kind of stepping in. I feel like this is just one of those weight classes where at 141 pounds, any given day, these guys are going to fight and wrestle each other to different match scores. But Mendez seems to be the most consistent over time. But yeah, this one will be interesting to play out. 49. 49 is another one that kind of got shook up from the Big Ten tournament. Yeah, Brian, what do you got for that one?
So if I'm 149-pound weight class, to me, is the only weight class that I believe is tougher outside of the Big Ten, right? From a Big Ten perspective, as we talked about, a lot more wrestlers outside of the Big Ten ranked in the top 8, top 10, and felt like Cannon was a little disrespected at the 7th seed. Don't really like where he fell in the bracket here. If things go well, we're going to do seeded out. He gets loved in the quarters. I don't love that for Cannon after his showing taking 2nd in the Big Ten. You look on top, you got Ethan Styles, another wrestler. He stubs his toe, loses the match in the finals of the Pac-12, and I thought he would be an 8th or 9th seed. He falls all the way to 12th. But Caleb the Hitman Henson up top, physical specimen, maybe the most cut wrestler you'll ever see at a weight class below 157. I was really hoping that Cannon would get a better seed here, but I look at that top half of the bracket, and there's a ton of firepower. You got Parko and Styles in the quarters. You got Jordan Williams up top, Caleb Henson, and then I see a clear path, for Lovett and Webster in the quarters. And Van Ness and McNeil, and I don't think that's much of a match. So it'll all come down to where it plays out again, and hopefully Cannon can turn the tide in that second matchup, which he did against Emilio and Van Ness, but it's a tough task.
Yeah. Was Styles at a heavier weight earlier in the year?
Yeah, 157.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was confused by that because I was like, I could have swore he was heavier than this, but yeah. Jordan, what do you think? You think Cannon's going to keep shocking people?
Yeah, so I'm going to jump after this point, but it's a little bit of a Big Ten rewind, so to speak, in reverse order. It'd be Lovett and then likely Van Ness back to back. The one thing that I liked about the Lovett match with Cannon was, he was in striking distance and he had an opportunity to run him down at the end. What I think at least I took away from that was similar to what I was talking about previously with Luffman is I think you have to start a little bit earlier. If you find yourself in the third period having to get a takedown and you start level changing or you start trying to put that pressure on, and especially somebody like Ridge Lovett, the guy's such a winner that he's not gonna wilt. You know, he's not really gonna give you anything to key in on that late. I think, you know, for lack of a better term, that third period sprint has to be
just like the Illini. We're back. We're back, baby.
Yeah, just for a second, but you can finish up.
Everything went frozen. I'm talking and you guys are just frozen. I'm like, can you hear me?
So you were just talking about how, you know, how important it is to get moving early and not to let yourself wait until the end of the match with Webster.
So I think with the second time around against Lovett, I think he showed that, you know, he can hand fight, he can go even on the feet. And there wasn't a ton of areas where I felt like Lovett was able to get through. I thought he did a good job 2-on-1 control and the hand fight and things like that. I would just like to see him level change and give himself a couple opportunities early, not even necessarily for them to convert, but to force Lovett to, you know, waste a little bit of that energy, take a little bit out of his steam, so that in that third period, when you got to make it happen, something's going to open up maybe a little bit more, and you'll have just enough to go get it done. Similar to that Van Ness match, you know?
Yeah. I mean, Lovett's probably, you know, one of the top 3 riders in the country. No one better on top. And you know, they had him scouted out. There was no way Cannon was going down. So to Jordan's point, if you're going to get in that match, you can't stick around to the third period, right? You have to score at some point because you're not going down on Lovett. And to be honest with you, if you get that choice, there might be a spot where Lovett, if he gets his choice in the third period, he might take top. He might take top and neutralize Cannon. So he has to score early.
He did it against Henson last year in the NCAA semis, I believe it was. He chose top, you know, so it's not out of the realm of possibility at all.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Well, either way, Jordan, thanks for joining us. We will talk to you soon. Good luck with the rest of the week, and we'll be watching along with you at the NCAA tournament stuff. So thanks for joining.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks, Dalton, for having me. Brian, always great to see you. Good luck to all the Illinois wrestlers competing next weekend, and go Illini. I'll talk to you guys.
ILL.
INI.
Woo.
Oh, man. Well, that was good. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you guys. I think the Cannon Webster, I mean, I think he can find a way through that bracket. I mean, it's hard. It's a tough bracket. You know, Ridge Lovett, he's been at the top for a long time. He's always been consistently in the mix. And that match was, you know, a Big Ten final is going to be a quarter. Kind of makes sense. And like you said, this is one of those brackets where there's so many kids that are top ranked from the outside that are coming in. I mean, Kyle Parko at the beginning of the season, he looked unstoppable. I thought he was like going to, you know, run through the place. And then obviously Jordan Williams at Arkansas, like he was at Oklahoma State last year. Really good kid. I mean, Jaden Abbas, Stanford, he gets big wins before at NCAA. So, yeah, this bracket alone is just chaos. But 157, you know, Tyler Kasich gets the number 1 seed. He's a Big Ten champ. Meyer Shapiro gets the number 2 seed. Ja'Cory Teamer. And again, I just said that about Parko, but Ja'Cory Teamer at the beginning here, I was like, oh, this is why they spent so much money to get this kid here. I thought he was going to walk through the national tournament. He gets a little injured in the season, doesn't really wrestle that much, and then doesn't really perform at what he would basically won, I guess, at the Big Ten tournament. Now he gets the 18 seed. He feeds into Meyer Shapiro in the first round match, And
they wrestled last year in the NCAA finals, I believe, right? So it's like,
yeah,
you know, I'm shocked that Iowa faithful, right? The Iowa brand Teamer gets the 18 seed, right? do him no favors there. But there are some other Illinois kids in this bracket. Trevor Chumley gets an at-large bid. He's in the bracket, which, good for Trevor. And then Vinny Zerbin has the, Big 12 tournament of his life, a former Illinois kid from down south, and he's in there, but I'm looking forward to, and I'm not trying to jump way ahead, but I think the Kasich-Shapiro matchup would be the best finals matchup of all 10. That is the one I'm looking forward to the most. Shapiro is just so good and so fun to watch. Kasich is so physical. So I really want to see that matchup, and I hope we get it.
Yeah. Well, we might. 165. So, going into the 165 pound weight class, like, is there, we talked about it earlier with Messenbrink and Caliendo in the finals. Messenbrink, has a phenomenal season. He tech falls Caliendo in the duel, and then Caliendo bounces back and he wrestles that close match. Is there anything that you see in this bracket that is going to potentially change that outcome of those two in the finals?
I don't, and I see that same matchup. There's some interesting matches that are going to happen before that. Speaking of another Illini kid, Braden Scholes, I really like where he sits in the bracket, and I really think that Manatona matchup in the quarters. And this isn't a hometown call. I really like that matchup as long as Braden. If Manatona keeps the match on his feet, he has a clear advantage. If the match goes to the mat, advantage Scholes. But another guy that's kind of peaking that I like in the bottom half of this bracket is I like that Garvin and Sparks second round matchup, and Peyton Hall and Caliendo in the semis. I see this bracket kind of falling into place, but I do think Julian Ramirez it will be surprised and he'll get in that semifinals in my opinion against Messenbrink. But we're going to see Messenbrink and Caliendo again, and unfortunately for the state of Illinois. It's going to be the same outcome. No one's stopping Mitchell Messenbrink, and there's a good chance because Gable Steveson hasn't wrestled enough matches, that Messenbrink, could be right up there for the Most Valuable Wrestler Hodge Trophy Award with Carter Sirachi.
Now, the only thing I want to ask is, have we seen Cam Amin versus Messenbrink? Because not too long ago in history, Cam Amin takes out the Bull of Iowa in the semifinals or the quarterfinals. And so, can he do this again?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up and not to focus on that matchup, but these older transfers are, I'll be honest with you. Yeah, you're always going to have a handful that are going to, the Buchanans, right? The Ferraris, they're always going to be there, but there's a lot of transfers. If maybe this is for a later podcast, but there's a lot of transfers not performing to the dollar amounts that they got it. And to me, and I think Cam Amin is one of those. You have Cam Amin at 165. I don't think they brought him there from Michigan to be 16-5. Does Messenbrink tech him? Don't know if he techs him, but I'll tell you this: it'll be between a major and a tech.
Yeah, well, we'll see. He's tough to score on, and he likes some close matches, but Messenbrink seems rather unstoppable. So that Bear Claw Messenbrink match could be interesting. Former teammates, I'm sure they practice a few times, and then obviously, Peyton Hall. I think Peyton Hall lost to Bear Claw earlier in the year, so Peyton Hall is tough too. And Peyton Hall Peyton Hall beats Cam Amin at like the last second in a takedown in the duel. So I definitely think Cam Amin does not have as much offense as any of these other guys, but he's capable of being a thorn in somebody's side. So 74, this weight class, I love watching Dean Hamidi wrestle, and he's a Illinois kid. He just wrestles so well. Like, he's just constantly moving, constantly wrestling, and for him to lose to Keegan O'Toole last week in an overtime, it just speaks that Keegan O'Toole is that good. But we're gonna see Dean Hamidi, Levi Haynes potential semifinal match. How do you see this one going? And do you think Braunagel can get through with the performance that he had at the 20 seed? He's either going to be, Garrett Thompson is probably a little bit maybe upset that he's got him so early in the tournament. But what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, from an Illinois perspective, right? University of Illinois, Danny Bronigo, this seed is no justice, right? And it, if the tide turns and he wrestles in the finals, it gets that doesn't give up that takedown. Where is he seated, right? But yeah, I do not like the seed. I don't like the quadrant that he's in. Kate DeVos is very tough, All American, and Danny gets him first match. But you mentioned Dean Hamidi, and Dean has just been phenomenal all year, and had an opportunity to watch that Keegan O'Toole match, and it's like it's Keegan O'Toole, the veteran, right? Nothing bothers him, nothing flusters him. Dean jumps out to an early lead, and Keegan just keeps chipping away at him and takes the match to overtime and beats him. And hopefully Dean gets a shot at him. But if you watch Levi Haynes wrestle, Levi Haynes is up from 57 to 174, and it doesn't look like you'd say to yourself, and you would admit this. Someone jumps up 2 weight classes, they're small for the weight class. Levi Haynes does not look small for 174 after wrestling 157. He's big, he's physical, he's strong. It's contrasting styles to me, right? Hamidi and Haynes. And where does that go? From an Illinois perspective, I love to see Dean get after it, but that's probably one of the most anticipated semifinal matchups, and to get a shot at Keegan O'Toole again, that one will be tough to call. And I don't know. I'm undecided on the Hamidi Haynes matchup. Maybe it's something, I have the ability to change my mind in a week. We could do a final, podcast right before, do a quick 1 through 4 or something. But
yeah,
I think it's so hard to bet against Haynes after watching him at the Big Tens.
Yeah, I mean, both of those guys are so good, and that's why I said this is probably my favorite weight class when it comes to the top 4 or the top 5. They're just so good. It's not a bad match, and from a spectator perspective, this is a weight class similar to 141. You're gonna get your money's worth with every single match. They're going to compete hard. They're going to try to win, and you're going to see a lot of high-level wrestling. So I think this is another match that is going to be great for fans. 84, this is another one that we kind of, talked about because there's a lot of Big Ten implications. The one that you're going to throw in here that's going to add to it, or the two, is Dustin Plott and Parker Keckheisen. Plott's coming in at the 4 seed, Keckheisen at 2. So it spreads out, the bracket pretty good with Big Ten and the Big 12. But yeah, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen with this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to get the matchup that everyone wants. The matchup from earlier, at the national duels or however they describe that.
The All-Star Classic.
Yeah, All-Star Classic. Starach against Keckheisen. That's the one everyone wants to see, and I think we're going to get that matchup. But there's a lot in between, and and Edmund Ruth, he beats Jackson Smith, and Smith is the 8th seed, Ruth's the 10th seed. He had a better season, Smith, but I like where Edmund's sitting in this bracket, and I can really see Edmund. I could see him, basically in the quarterfinals against Keckheisen. But I do think we're going to get that Starachi-Keckheisen matchup that everyone wants. And, but Max McAnally, I was really impressed. He goes out and gets the first takedown, probably the only time Starachi all season's been losing. So that Max McAnally-Keckheisen matchup in the semifinals will be intriguing as well. But I think we'll get the matchup we're all looking for.
Yeah. 197. This one was, the Big Ten tournament. We saw Jacob Cardenas beat Stephen Buchanan, and Buchanan looked, tough all year, but he loses, and now he's on the side with AJ Ferrari. I mean, who do you got making it out? And Josh Barr sitting at the number 4 spot. Even though he didn't have a top 4 finish at the Big Ten, he still holds on to the 4 seed. We got Zach Braunagel up at the 9 seed. I mean, don't you think that this is a good spot? I mean, both Braunagel and Serber, I think, are a really good spot because both of those kids have been wrestling really well all season. And I don't think Cardenas is unbeatable, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I love that analysis, and I agree with you. I think, if I look at any way that a quarterfinal match is going to play out, this is exactly where I want Zach at. And no disrespect to 197 pounders, but I'm looking at this bracket from a whole, and it's very top heavy, and then it's very flat, right? So maybe the weakest weight class from 1 to 33 across the board. So I think there's opportunities here. The biggest question is Josh Barr healthy? He suffers a knee injury or an ankle injury. We're not quite sure. Will he be ready, and will he be ready to go? That bottom quadrant, of the top bracket, that could really, play out different. You got Beard, who's a former All-American. You got Stephen Little, Trey Munoz. How does that play out if Barr is not healthy? But to your point, I love where Zach's sitting. And I don't know that there's a big difference between Cardenas, Buchanan, the 1 through 4 seeds. To me, they're all the same, right? So pick your poison. But is there any bigger villain in college wrestling than AJ Ferrari? One, he's awesome, great wrestler, but, he's a villain. Everyone likes to root against him. So it'll be interesting to see. He's an entertainer. Well, I hate to say this, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the finals.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think I would not be surprised that he's in the finals. What's going to be interesting is to see we're not going to see, because I don't think they televise too much of the crowd action. But if you've been to the NCAA tournament, the crowd is picking guys every round to cheer for. So the Iowa people will cheer for somebody they want. Well, I'm curious, is Iowa going to support Zach Glazier, their former wrestler that they were supporting in the Soldier Salute, or are they going to be supporting AJ Ferrari, brother of Ferrari, the other Ferrari that is on their team? So what do you think? Who are they picking to support in that match?
Well, I mean, this is where it all started, right? Or all fell apart after the Oklahoma State leaving of Ferrari, right? He's wrestling unattached. Him and Glazier get into an argument, a pushing fighting match afterwards. They disqualify him. He does the famous splits and double birds, the real double birds. Now he's doing, the birds of Cal State Bakerfield, right? And I'm going to say this. They're going to cheer for Ferrari because there's no doubt in my mind that he's going to be wearing an Iowa singlet next year.
That's that's great that you said that, because I've been saying that, and a lot of people thought that ship had sailed, and I was like, I don't think that it sailed. I think they had some type of competitive wrestle off or whatever between Buchanan and Ferrari, and the coaching staff and the alumni, whoever is pulling the strings on the NIL. I think they decided to go with Buchanan over Ferrari, but I would not be surprised that AJ Ferrari ends up in Iowa City next year as well. So I'm with you. I think that they're going to be rooting for AJ there. Going in last weight class, I mean, we kind of summarized this. This is the Gable Steveson show, and I think I think the Greg Kirkfleet Wyatt Hendrickson semifinal. I'm really happy that it played out this way, because I wasn't sure whether or not, because Hendrickson didn't get to wrestle some of these other teams, whether or not he was going to be a 2 or a 3 seed. But because it's set up like that, I think it's a positive thing, because in that semifinal, if we get to see Kirkfleet, Hendrickson, now we know whoever's going to the final is the third best wrestler or the second best wrestler. So.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it. I mean, it's Gable Steveson all the way. And then, it's kind of like, I mentioned the Jordan thing, but it's like Larry Bird walking in for the 3-point contest. Like, who's taking second, right?
Yeah.
And I think, the Kirkfleet Hendrickson matchup is to me, I'm not undecided on it. I need to go back and look at some common opponent stuff, look at some other stuff. But, I mean, Kirkfleet's just so long and hard to score on. But, the thing that's in my mind and embedded is how normal or average Stevenson made him look, right? But no one else makes him look that way. So, undecided who will wrestle in the finals, but it's the Gable Steveson show or bust, and that's where we're at. But, I mean, this has been a great breakdown and been totally, awesome for where we're at and tying in some of these Illinois wrestlers and bringing on the weekend that we had with the Fighting Illini. But, just awesome to do this. And, I hope this is something that we can build on Dalton and something that, we can go across the state and keep that college, momentum going.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. This was fun for me. I love talking college wrestling. I love talking Illinois wrestling, and I wanted to make sure and get this started. So for everybody watching, there will be more to come. If you're a college wrestling fan in the state of Illinois, be sure to like and subscribe and stay on the lookout for the next one. We will definitely be talking about the NCAA tournament either during the tournament or currently right after. So yeah, thanks again. And yeah, thanks for jumping on with me, Brian.
That's awesome, Don. Thanks for having me. I look forward to it, man. And then, if we can't get on next week and do some more breakdowns, I'm sure we're going to do a recap, especially if there's a lot of Illinois wrestlers with All-American plaques on them,
Yep. Let's hope so.